His wife passed at 8 months pregnant, but when he visited her grave, he was shocked to see. A grieving widower visited his wife's grave, who had passed away at 8 months pregnant. But when he arrived at the cemetery, he made a shocking discovery. What dark secrets would he uncover about his wife's mysterious death, and how was this even possible when she was buried just beneath the ground? The mist hung low over the Virginia cemetery on that Saturday morning, the sun barely breaking through the clouds. Jordan's car pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, the quiet hum of the engine disrupting the morning stillness. Checking his watch, he noted it had been exactly a month since Sherry's burial. The weight of that realization settled heavily on his shoulders as he stepped out of the vehicle. Jordan, a 35-year-old man, stood for a moment, taking in the somber atmosphere. The cemetery stretched before him, a sea of granite and marble markers standing in silent tribute to lives lost. The damp grass crunched softly underfoot as he made his way to the trunk of his car. With practiced movements, he gathered his supplies, a metal watering can filled to the brim and fresh flowers wrapped in green paper. The weight of the water made his steps deliberate as he navigated between the headstones. He had made this journey every Saturday since the funeral, though today felt heavier with the 1-month anniversary looming. As he walked through the misty cemetery, Jordan's mind wandered to memories of Sherry, her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the excitement in her voice when they talked about their future child. The pain of loss was still raw, a constant ache in his chest that never seemed to subside. He recalled the day they found out they were expecting. Sherry had burst into their bedroom, pregnancy test in hand, her face alight with joy. They had stayed up all night talking about names, planning the nursery, dreaming of the life they would build together. Now those dreams lay shattered, buried 6 feet under with the woman he loved. Jordan's reverie was interrupted when he spotted a female figure through the morning mist. She was standing by Sherry's grave, her posture and silhouette hauntingly familiar, same height and build as his wife, even wearing similar flowing clothes. His heart raced, a mixture of hope and disbelief coursing through him. "Hello?" Jordan called out, his voice breaking the eerie silence. The woman vanished so quickly it left him questioning his own vision. Had she been real, or was his grief playing tricks on his mind? Jordan blinked rapidly, trying to clear both the mist from his eyes and the confusion from his thoughts. He stood frozen for a moment, staring at the spot where the woman had been. Part of him wanted to run after her to confirm what he had seen, but another part, the rational part, told him it was impossible. Sherry was gone. He had attended her funeral and watched as they lowered her casket into the ground. Yet the image of the woman lingered in his mind, refusing to fade away. Shaking his head, Jordan continued his walk to Sherry's plot. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his supplies, carefully brushing dust and mist from her carved name, Sherry L. Williams. He began watering the dry, cracked soil, noticing small sprouts of wild grass emerging, signs of life above where his wife and unborn child rested. As he tended to the grave, Jordan spoke softly, words meant only for Sherry. "Hey, sweetheart, it's been a month now. I miss you both so much." His voice broke as he recalled preparing their nursery together, the joy of anticipating their child's arrival. "The room is still there, you know. I can't bring myself to change it. Sometimes I sit in the rocking chair, imagining what could have been." He paused, fighting back tears. The memory of being denied a final view of her at the funeral resurfaced, having rushed from the airport, only to find the casket already sealed by her family's orders. The bitterness of that moment still stung. "I wish I could have seen you one last time," Jordan whispered, his fingers tracing the outline of Sherry's face in the photograph on the headstone. "Your family, they took that from me, from us. I don't understand why they rushed everything. Why wouldn't they let me say goodbye properly?" He sat in silence for a while, listening to the faint rustling of leaves and distant bird song. The peacefulness of the cemetery contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart. He reached out, touching the cold stone of the headstone. "I keep expecting to see you everywhere. At the grocery store, at the coffee shop we used to love. Sometimes, I think I hear your voice in a crowd. Is that normal? Am I going crazy?" Jordan's eyes drifted to the spot where he had seen the mysterious woman earlier. "I thought I saw you today, just for a moment. I know it's impossible, but it looked so much like you. Maybe I'm just desperate to believe you're still here somehow." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I hope you're at peace, Sherry. I hope our little one is with you, and that you're both watching over me somehow. I'll keep coming back every week. I promise." As he finished tending to the grave, Jordan couldn't shake the image of the woman he'd seen earlier. It had seemed so real, so familiar. But it couldn't be, could it? He tried to rationalize it as a trick of the light, a manifestation of his grief. Yet a small part of him clung to the impossibility, a faint glimmer of hope in a sea of sorrow. With a heavy sigh, Jordan gathered his empty watering can and stood up. He took one last look at Sherry's grave, the fresh flowers offering a brief burst of color against the somber stone. As he neared the headstone to plant a kiss on it, his gaze shifted to the photo embedded in the stone. It had deteriorated more than he realized, the colors faded, washed out by years of unrelenting sun and weather. A deep frown crossed his face as he took in the damage. Preserving her memory, making sure she was remembered clearly and vividly, felt more urgent than ever. Earlier that morning, the thick mist had hidden the extent of the wear, and he hadn't noticed until now. "I'll get that fixed for you, sweetheart," he said softly, making a mental note to visit the print shop that served the cemetery's visitors. It was just a few blocks away. An errand he could easily accomplish before heading home. "I'll be back soon with a new photo. I love you," he murmured before turning to make his way back to the car, his heart as heavy as his footsteps on the damp grass. As he walked away, Jordan couldn't help but glance back over his shoulder, half expecting to see the mysterious woman again. But the cemetery remained still and silent, offering no answers to the questions now plaguing his mind. The drive to the print shop was short, but it gave Jordan time to reflect on the events of the past day. He couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that there was more to Sherry's death than he knew. But what could it be, and how could he even begin to unravel such a mystery? The print shop was bustling with activity when Jordan arrived, a stark contrast to the quiet solemnity of the cemetery. He joined the line of customers, waiting to print memorial photos, feeling slightly out of place amid the chatter and movement. As he waited, Jordan pulled out his phone and began scrolling through photos of Sherry. Each image brought a flood of memories. Their first date, their wedding day, the day they found out they were expecting. He found himself scrutinizing the faces of Sherry's friends and family in the background of these photos, searching for someone who resembled the woman he saw yesterday. "Next, please," called the clerk, startling Jordan from his reverie. He approached the counter, still distracted. "I need to print a photo for a grave marker, please," he said, his voice low. The clerk nodded sympathetically. "Of course, sir. Do you have the photo selected?" Jordan hesitated, then chose a picture of Sherry from their last vacation together. In it, she was laughing, her face radiant with joy and the promise of their future together. "This one," he said, handing over his phone. As the clerk processed the order, Jordan moved to the waiting area, settling on a corner bench. He couldn't shake the image of the woman at the grave. He continued searching social media for any friends or family resembling Sherry, finding no satisfactory explanations for what he had seen. Time seemed to stretch as Jordan waited, lost in thought. He barely noticed as other customers came and went, their own stories of loss and remembrance swirling around him, unheard. "Mr. Williams," the clerk's voice cut through his contemplation. Jordan blinked, realizing the staff had called his name multiple times. He stood, slightly embarrassed, and made his way back to the counter. The photo had been printed and framed, ready for pickup. Jordan checked the quality, a lump forming in his throat as he looked at Sherry's smiling face. "Sorry about that," he managed to say. It's perfect. Thank you. As he was about to leave, something caught Jordan's eye. A woman was entering the shop, her build and hair color strikingly similar to Sherry's. For a moment, his heart raced. Could it be the same woman from the cemetery? But as she turned, Jordan's hope deflated. While similar, this woman was clearly not Sherry, nor was she the figure he had seen. He shook his head, chiding himself for getting carried away. With the new photo carefully tucked under his arm, Jordan left the shop and headed back to his car. The world seemed a little brighter now, Sherry's smile a beacon of warmth in his grief-darkened world. As he drove back to the cemetery, Jordan noticed more visitors arriving and a funeral procession in the distance. The morning quiet had given way to the soft murmur of grieving families and funeral services. It was a reminder that he wasn't alone in his pain, that the cycle of life and death continued for everyone. Jordan parked his car and made his way back to Sherry's grave, the new photo held carefully in his hands. With each step, he felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Part of him hoped to see the mysterious woman again, while another part feared the disappointment if she wasn't there. As he approached Sherry's final resting place, Jordan's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. But as the grave came into view, Jordan stopped short, his body freezing at the sight before him. At the top of Sherry's grave lay a white infant, carefully swaddled in a blanket. His mind reeled, unable to process what he was seeing. He blinked hard, certain he must be hallucinating, but when he opened his eyes, the baby was still there, small and vulnerable against the cold stone. Cautiously, Jordan approached, his legs feeling weak beneath him. As he got closer, he could make out the baby's features. Blonde hair and striking blue eyes, a perfect match to Sherry's own coloring. The resemblance was uncanny, almost impossible. His mind raced with impossibilities. His wife had died while still pregnant, and he had the hospital documents to prove it. Papers his father-in-law Gerald had handed him after the funeral. Yet, the timing seemed to match perfectly. The baby appeared to be about 1 month old, which coincided with when Sherry was due. "This can't be real," Jordan whispered, his voice shaking. "It's not possible." He scanned the surrounding area for any sign of who might have left the infant. The cemetery workers were visible in the distance, but no one else was nearby. The baby stirred, the sound tugging at Jordan's heart. Torn between confusion and an overwhelming instinct to protect, he gently picked up the baby. The child felt warm and solid in his arms, undeniably real. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, his voice cracking. "Where did you come from?" The baby blinked up at him, those familiar blue eyes seeming to hold all the secrets of the universe. Jordan felt a connection, an inexplicable bond that both thrilled and terrified him. As he stood there holding the baby, trying to make sense of the situation, 1,000 questions raced through his mind. How did this baby get here? Who left it? And most importantly, could this child possibly be his and Sherry's? The logical part of his brain insisted it was impossible. Sherry had died before giving birth. He had seen her body, attended her funeral. But another part of him, the part that had been clinging to hope since seeing the mysterious woman, whispered that maybe, just maybe, there was more to this story than he knew. Jordan looked down at the baby again, studying its features. The resemblance to Sherry was undeniable. The shape of the eyes, the curve of the nose, even the tiny dimple in the chin. It was like looking at a miniature version of his wife. "What am I going to do with you?" he murmured, gently stroking the baby's cheek. He knew he couldn't leave the infant alone in the cemetery. The heat was rising, and the child needed proper care. But what were his options? He couldn't just take a baby home without explanation. He needed help and, more urgently, he needed answers. Realizing he needed guidance, Jordan decided to seek out the cemetery caretaker. Carefully holding the baby, he made his way to the far side of the cemetery where he had often seen the old man working. He found the elderly caretaker tending to a flower bed, his weathered hands gently pruning roses. The old man looked up as Jordan approached, his eyes widening at the sight of the baby. "Excuse me," Jordan said, his voice urgent. "I found this baby on my wife's grave. Have you seen anyone leave a child here?" The caretaker's response was cryptically poetic. "Heaven's doors have been open this week, young man. Souls might slip back through. You never know." Jordan frowned, unsure how to interpret the old man's words. "What do you mean? Have you seen anything unusual?" The caretaker shrugged, his eyes twinkling with a mysterious light. "We've had multiple deaths this week. The cemetery's been crowded. Can't be sure if anyone left a baby, but stranger things have happened in this place." Frustrated by the lack of a clear answer, Jordan thanked the caretaker and walked away, the baby still nestled in his arms. He knew he couldn't leave the infant alone in the cemetery. As he made his way back to his car, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. His disbelief at the situation, the undeniable reality of the child in his arms, and the weight of what it all meant. He looked down at the baby, now asleep, peaceful and trusting. When he reached his car and carefully opened the door, it hit him with a start. He had no car seat, no supplies, nothing needed to safely transport an infant. The gravity of the situation crashed over him. Jordan stood there holding the baby, feeling more lost and overwhelmed than he had since Sherry's death. But as he looked at the child's face, so reminiscent of his late wife, he felt a surge of determination. "Okay, little one," he said softly. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but I'm going to figure this out. I promise." With that, Jordan carefully settled into the car, holding the baby securely against his chest. He knew he needed help and fast, and his mind was already forming a plan. He started the engine, casting one last look at Sherry's grave before driving away from the cemetery. As he merged onto the main road, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken another dramatic turn. The mystery of the baby's appearance and its uncanny resemblance to Sherry weighed heavily on his mind, but for now, his priority was clear. He needed to ensure the safety and well-being of this unexpected child. Jordan's heart sank, but there had to be something, an inconsistency, a detail that didn't add up. The detectives exchanged another look. "Mr. Williams," one of them said gently, "I know this isn't what you want to hear, but all the evidence confirms your wife's passing. The woman you saw at the cemetery, it must have been someone else, maybe a relative or a friend of your wife whom you weren't familiar with." Jordan shook his head, frustration building. He could see the concern in their eyes, the growing belief that he was a man undone by grief. With a sinking feeling, he realized that help wasn't coming from them. "Thank you for your time," he said abruptly, standing up. "I appreciate you looking into this." As he left the station, Jordan's mind raced. The official records confirmed Sherry's death, yet they had a son, their son, who couldn't possibly exist if those records were true. Something was terribly wrong, and he knew he had to uncover the truth on his own. Getting back into his car, his hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. The image of Sherry at the cemetery, the baby's blue eyes, the positive DNA test, everything swirled in his mind, pieces of an impossible puzzle. Taking a deep breath, he started the engine. He had one more stop to make before returning to the cemetery. Whatever web of lies or misconceptions surrounded Sherry's supposed death, he was determined to unravel it. Jordan drove back to Tommy's clinic, where Lyanna had been caring for the baby. As he entered, Lyanna greeted him with a sympathetic smile. "How did it go at the police station?" she asked gently, rocking the sleeping infant in her arms. Jordan shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "They didn't believe me. Everything in their records shows that Sherry is gone, but we know that can't be true." Lyanna nodded, her eyes filled with concern. "What will you do now?" "I need to go back to the cemetery," Jordan said, his resolve strengthening. "There might be more clues there. I'll try asking around, maybe there are other funeral caretakers. I have to find out what's really going on." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Lyanna handed him the baby and quickly gathered some supplies. "Here," she said, passing him a bag. I've packed formula, diapers, baby clothes, and swaddles. You'll need these if you're taking him with you. But be careful, Jordan. You don't have a car seat for the baby. I can't imagine what could happen. Jordan accepted the bag gratefully. Thank you, Lyanna, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you and Tommy. Before he left, Lyanna quickly gave him a tutorial on feeding and changing the baby. If he cries, check his diaper first. If that's not it, he might be hungry. The formula is easy to mix. Just follow the instructions on the can, and make sure to support his head when you hold him. Jordan listened intently, the reality of caring for a newborn suddenly feeling very real. I'll do my best, he promised. With the baby securely in his arms and the supplies in tow, Jordan left the clinic and headed back to the cemetery. The afternoon sun was at its peak, casting long shadows across the headstones. Hoping to find more people to question, Jordan made his way to Sherry's grave. But when he reached it, the area was deserted. The baby began to fuss, his tiny face scrunching as he prepared to cry. Remembering Lyanna's instructions, Jordan quickly prepared a bottle, using Sherry's tombstone as a makeshift table to mix the formula. The baby's cries grew louder, echoing in the quiet cemetery. "Shoo, it's okay," Jordan murmured, cradling the infant close as he offered the bottle. The baby latched on eagerly, his cries subsiding as Jordan fed his son. His eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign of the funeral caretakers. He reminded himself to be more patient when talking to them today, even with all their superstitions. After all, they had been living here for years. But the cemetery remained still and silent. The baby continued to fuss even after finishing the bottle. Remembering Lyanna's advice, Jordan decided to check his diaper. As he opened the blanket, a note tucked inside the baby's furry hoodie fell to the ground. Jordan's heart raced as he picked up the paper. Written on the back of a laundry stamp card was a simple message: "I'm so sorry for all this. Please, please take care of him." His breath caught in his throat. The handwriting was unmistakably Sherry's. He turned the card over, his eyes widening as he recognized the address stamped on the front, a laundromat in North Carolina, not far from Sherry's family home. Jordan's mind raced with possibilities. Was Sherry alive? Had she somehow faked her death? And if so, why? What could have driven her to such extreme measures? He knew he needed help to unravel this mystery. With trembling fingers, he dialed his mother's number. "Mom," he said, as soon as she answered, his voice thick with emotion, "I need your help. Something impossible has happened." Jordan explained everything to his mother. The baby, the DNA test, and now the mysterious note. Sharon listened in stunned silence from the other end of the line. "Oh, Jordan," she breathed when he finished. "I don't even know what to say. What are you going to do?" "I have to go to North Carolina," Jordan said, his resolve strengthening. "I need to find out what's really going on." "But, Mom, I can't do this alone." "Say no more," Sharon interrupted. "I'll be ready in 15 minutes. Pick me up on your way." Relief washed over Jordan. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you." True to her word, Sharon was waiting on her front porch when Jordan pulled up 15 minutes later. She had a small overnight bag with her and quickly made her way to the car. As she opened the passenger door, her eyes immediately went to the baby in the makeshift car seat. "Oh, Jordan," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "He looks just like Sherry." Jordan managed a small smile. "I know. It's a lot to take in, Mom. Thank you for coming with us." Sharon reached over and squeezed his hand. "I've packed everything the baby needs. I had a quick run to the convenience store." "You're the best, Mom," Jordan said. "We're family. We'll figure this out together." With his mother by his side and his son safely secured, Jordan felt a renewed sense of determination as he pulled away from the curb. The road to North Carolina, and hopefully answers, stretched out before them. The highway seemed to unfold endlessly as they drove, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the darkening landscape. Jordan gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Beside him, Sharon, with the baby, managed feedings and diaper changes with practiced ease. "How's he doing?" Jordan asked, glancing over at his son. The word still felt strange on his tongue. Son, a miracle he never thought he'd experience after Sherry's supposed death. Sharon smiled softly. "He's perfect, Jordan. Sleeping like an angel." She paused, her expression growing serious. "But we really need to get a proper car seat. This isn't safe." Jordan nodded, guilt mixing with the myriad of other emotions swirling inside him. "I know. We'll stop at the next big town and pick one up. I couldn't wait. We need answers." As they drove, Sharon filled the car with quiet conversation, asking questions about the events of the day. Jordan recounted everything: finding the baby, the DNA test at Tommy's clinic. With each retelling, the reality of the situation seemed to solidify, becoming less dreamlike and more urgently real. "What I don't understand," Sharon said, her voice low to avoid waking the baby, "is why Sherry's family would do this. The hostility at the funeral, refusing to let you view the body, rushing to seal the casket, it all seems so cruel." Jordan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I've been thinking about that, too. They never approved of our relationship. Gerald, her father especially. He always made it clear he thought Sherry could do better than me." "Better than you?" Sharon's voice was sharp with maternal indignation. "You were nothing but good to Sherry. You loved her. You supported her dreams. What more could a father want for his daughter?" Jordan sighed. "I think it was about more than just me. The way Gerald looked at us sometimes, I always got the feeling he saw me as somehow less than them, less worthy." A heavy silence fell over the car as the implications of Jordan's words sank in. The soft sounds of the baby's breathing filled the space, a reminder of the innocent life caught in the middle of this tangled web. As they approached the familiar neighborhood where Sherry had grown up, Jordan's chest tightened. The manicured lawns of the golf course came into view, followed by the sparkling surface of the lake. And there, perched on its hill like a fortress, stood the Williams family mansion. Memories flooded back. Happy ones of his life with Sherry, mixed with the bitter recollection of her family's constant disapproval. The last time he had been here was to move Sherry's belongings to Virginia, a day filled with tense silences and barely concealed hostility. Jordan parked at the gatehouse, his heart racing. "Mom, I need you to wait here with the baby. If anything goes wrong, I'll call you." Sharon nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Be careful, Jordan. And remember, no matter what happens in there, you have a son who needs you now." With a deep breath, Jordan stepped out of the car and approached the intercom. The guard's voice crackled through the speaker, immediately hostile upon hearing Jordan's name. "Mr. Williams is not expecting visitors," the guard said, his tone clipped. "Please," Jordan insisted, "I'm Sherry's husband, Gerald's son-in-law. It's important that I speak with him." Several tense minutes passed, filled with Jordan's repeated pleas and identifications. Finally, with a reluctant buzz, the gates swung open. As Jordan drove up to the mansion's circular driveway, he could see Thelma and Gerald standing in the doorway, their postures rigid with tension. He took a moment to study the imposing facade of the house, steeling himself for the confrontation to come. Turning to Sharon, who still cradled the sleeping baby, Jordan spoke softly. "Whatever happens, Mom, remember that child is the most important thing now. If things go badly—" Sharon nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'll protect him with my life." Jordan gave her one last look before stepping out of the car and walking toward the mansion's entrance. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of unanswered questions and desperate hope for answers. As he approached, Gerald's voice rang out, falsely jovial. "Joe, my boy. What an unexpected surprise. I'm afraid there's been some mistake with the security. Come in, come in." But even as the words left Gerald's mouth, Jordan could see the tension in his posture, the barely concealed hostility in his eyes. This was not going to be an easy conversation. Taking a deep breath, Jordan ascended the marble steps, ready to confront whatever lay behind the mansion's imposing doors, the truth about Sherry, about their child, about the web of lies that had torn his life apart. It was all within reach, and Jordan was determined to uncover it, no matter the cost. The tension in the air was thick as he stood face to face with Thelma and Gerald at the mansion's grand entrance. The mid-afternoon sun cast shadows across the marble steps, emphasizing the physical and emotional barrier between them. Gerald's voice carried an undercurrent of tension, his politeness ringing false. "Jordan, what brings you all the way out here? Is everything all right?" Before Jordan could answer, Gerald's eyes darted past him, widening as they landed on the car where Sharon sat with the baby. Recognition flickered briefly across his face, only to be quickly masked by denial. Thelma, slightly behind her husband, fixed her gaze on the infant with unnerving intensity, her hands trembling at her sides. The sight of her reaction only deepened Jordan's suspicions that something was terribly wrong. "I think you know why I'm here," Jordan said, his voice steady despite the turmoil stirring within him. "I found my son at Sherry's grave this morning." Gerald's demeanor shifted instantly from false politeness to open hostility. "What nonsense are you talking about? Sherry died before giving birth. You know that. We all mourned that loss together." Jordan stood his ground, resolve strengthening. "Then how do you explain the DNA test proving he's my child? Or the note I found with him, written in Sher's handwriting? Now, tell me, where's my wife?" Thelma let out a small gasp, quickly stifled by Gerald's sharp glance. The older man's face twisted with anger as he spat out his response. "This is preposterous. Are you trying to extort money from us with this ridiculous story? That child could be yours from any woman, for all we know." The confrontation took a darker turn as Gerald's voice lowered, dripping with disdain. "You people are always looking for ways to squeeze money from respectable families like ours, aren't you?" The racial undertones of his accusation hung in the air. Jordan felt a surge of anger but kept his composure, focusing on his peaceful intention. "This isn't about money, Gerald. I just want to know the truth about my wife and child."